Hi, I'm Dr. Brennan Roach, and we welcome to a virtual tour of the Holy Land. And tonight we are going to Hezekiah's Tunnel, the city of David and Hezekiah's Tunnel, one of my favorite locations in Jerusalem. I did some research and some study on it while I was at Hebrew University studying archaeology. Fantastic, exciting place, and I am going to take you all on a journey with there tonight. So, without further ado, let's get straight into it. And we're going to have a look at the city of David and Hezekiah's tunnel. Well, as we've been going through different journeys and different locations, we see our next stop is Hezekiah's tunnel, which is a place of preparation. Our next stop, we go from the modern city of Jerusalem to the Mount of Olives in the time of Jesus, where we were last week. And now we are continuing on to ancient Jerusalem, to the city of David, as it's known, and the oldest part of Jerusalem that we have. As we spoke about in earlier lessons, the importance of water in ancient times. In Jerusalem, it was the Gihon spring. So the Gihon spring was the lifeblood of the city of Jerusalem. Without the Gihon spring, which we can see here on our map, we can see the Gihon spring located. Remember last week we're at the Mount of Olives. We've got the Garden of Gethsemane, and then we go down, follow the valley down, and we see the Gihon spring there going down the Kidron Valley. It was hugely important part of the water systems, and it still today produces a huge amount of water, but that was what fed and kept the water supply of the ancient city of Jerusalem under the time of the city of David applicable and viable. Now, Hezekiah's tunnel is one of the most interesting archaeological features of the city of David in the water system, and the water systems are well preserved and give us many valuable insights of Jerusalem in the first temple period. And that's the period from the King David until the destruction of the temple in 586 BC. So Hezekiah's tunnel, tonight I'm calling that the place of preparation. So let's go back over our journeys so far. We have Mount Nebo, the place of promise. We had Sodom, the place of righteousness. We had the Jordan River as the place of cleansing. We had Jericho as the place of spiritual victory. We had Wadi Kelt as the place of revelation. We had the Inn of the Good Samaritans, the place of no excuses. We had the Mount of Olives as the place of fruitfulness. And we are now in ancient Jerusalem in the city of David, Hezekiah's tunnel, the place of preparation. So where are we? If we have a look at the different series of maps here, I've sort of given you a little bit of an idea of what those maps might be like and how they might give us some sort of idea. Now, this is like a modern map. We've got the old city overlaid in the yellow there. We've got the Temple Mount as we can see it there with the Herodian wall or the Western wall. And we've got going through, we've got this longer shape coming down towards, which is called the City of David. And over in the dark green, we've got Mount Zion. So that's how you'd see, as you can see overlaid on a modern map. That gives you a little bit of an idea how it all fits in if you are blessed enough to find yourself in Jerusalem at any particular time. Now, here we go. And this is called the model out at the Israel Museum. And this gives you a bit of an idea of what it sort of looks like. Now, I've got to highlight to you, this is what the city of David would look like during the time of Jesus, but it gives you a bit of a good idea about how it sort of all sort of fitted in. We can see Mount Moriah at the top is where we've got the Temple Mount, or the Ophel, which is what happened, the place of the day of Pentecost. And then we've got very rich, luxurious, wealthy. Now, that was not King David's palace. That was in the time of Jesus, where many rich and wealthy people lived in this extension here. We can still see the Gihon spring. And as you can see, it's on the side of the very steep valley going down, which is known as the Kidron Valley. So the city of David is this central longish area here. So very, very small compared to what we know and understand as the city of David. So here's another diagram which just gives you a look at what it will look like during the time of David. And we've got the top part is where Mount Moriah was and where the sacrifice of Isaac would have taken place. We've got the small, long, elongated city here with you can see the city walls going around, and you can see the city contained within. And we've got valleys on the three sides. We've got the Kidron Valley, we've got the Hinnom Valley, and we've got the Central Valley. So we've got the hill there, and you can see this little extension of the city down here. Well, that was King Hezekiah built that extension to contain the Gihon Springs. So that's important. We'll have a little bit of a look at that. So again, that's another image of the same thing. We can see here the city of David up the top. We've got the palace area. And in this middle of the map here, we can see these walls and extension jutting out. And this is important because we want to talk about this. This is why I'm showing you several different angles and images. And as you can see, set amongst the mountains and not much around it, because the only reason for it to be there was actually the city of Jerusalem itself. So when are we? Well, we find ourselves in this period of time. We find ourselves, it's before 701 BC, and the Assyrian king Sennacherib is threatening an invasion. So this was the Assyrian king. He's a horrible king. He's a brutal king. He's known to come in and destroy. He impales people on sticks. When he eventually invades, he comes through all the northern cities of Israel and completely destroys them. And just some very extremely brutal activity that he takes place. Now, King Hezekiah himself was 715 to 686 BC. And we see during this time, he builds a tunnel to transport water from the Gihon spring into the pool of Siloam. Now, some of you are going, I've heard the name, the pool of Siloam. Well, that's because we remember the pool of Siloam in the time of Jesus is where the blind man was sent to wash and was healed. So we're going to do a comparison of the pool of Siloam and the pool of Bethesda at another point in time. So we'll talk about that as we come back to have a look at other things around Jerusalem during the time of Jesus. So this is over 200 years after King David and Solomon were ruling and reigning. So quite a period of time after. So King David has come in, has conquered the city. Solomon consolidates the city and starts building the temple. And we also see the great expansion that happens under the period of Solomon. So what happened here? So this is what we're going to focus on in this lesson is Hezekiah is the king did something that so many people don't do, or many of us just take for granted. Now, many of us talk about how it's important to pray. Many people talk about how it's important to plan and prepare. And many people talk about how important it is to believe what God said. Well, Hezekiah is a great example of doing all three. So Hezekiah planned, prepared, prayed, and believed. So this is a really good, really important lesson for us that we can look at as we go through. And a little bit later, I'm actually going to show you not only some pictures, but a little video that we've got of walking through part of the tunnel, which is, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it's very exciting. So let's have a look how Hezekiah planned. Let's start with 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verses 2 to 4. When Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib had come intent on making war against Jerusalem, he consulted with his officers and warriors about stopping the flow of the spring outside the city, and they supported him. So Hezekiah wasn't a leader who wasn't open to taking advice. So he met with his leadership, he met with his soldiers, he met with his city leaders, and he said, well, what we need to do is the first thing we need to do is we need to actually stop the water from going outside of the city. Now, the city of Jerusalem was besieged a few times, and it was really important if the water was able to be cut off and the city itself was not able to get a hold of the water, then of course you could only store so much water, and then it would be a very in the heat of the Israeli summer, you've got that it would just dry, it would evaporate, people would get within months, within weeks even, the whole city would be dying of thirst. So you don't want to have the water outside the city, which it was. Currently, it was already outside the city wall, and the foreign army can get a hold of it. And you've got the people inside the city wall who can't get access to the water. Now, that's the simple matter of what was going on. We're not going to talk about all the water systems and how it was, but essentially, David accessed the city by going up through the city's water systems, and that's how David actually conquered the city, which was, of course, well-known story throughout there. So Hezekiah was planning, how do we stop that from happening to us? How do we control? How do we make those outside of the city actually be the ones that get thirsty and can't sit outside the city for 2 years without having a massive amount of water being literally brought up by donkey from the lower parts of the city or lower parts of the region? So Hezekiah planned. Incredibly important. Sometimes we get so spiritual that we don't think planning is particularly important, but planning is incredibly important. And we see Hezekiah used all the wisdom of the people that God had placed around him. So how do we prepare the city? There's two things that had to happen. We have to stop the Assyrians from getting a hold of the water. And to do that, he builds a tunnel. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, to bring the water inside the city walls. The second thing, he builds new walls to keep the enemy out. So he builds a tunnel, but he also builds a set of walls around the water installment, around the Gihon springs, which the water flowed up out of a rock. It was a natural spring, flowed up out of the rock, and was enough water in the ancient city to actually provide enough fresh water for the whole of the city of David. Absolutely phenomenal. As we go on again, it's critically important how important it is to have water supply to be able to create any sort of city in the Old Testament times. So Hezekiah prepared, and we see that in 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verses 2 to 4. And we see a large force was assembled. So Hezekiah assembles a large force to stop up all the springs and the wadi that flowed through the land, for otherwise they thought the king of Assyria would come and find water in abundance. So he prepared, he planned, he prepared. So he had his plan. Now he's going to prepare. So he actually assembles a large force of people who are actually stopping up and making sure, hiding all the water supplies around the city of Jerusalem. So there was two major engineering projects that had to happen at the same time. Then we see Hezekiah prayed. 2 Kings chapter 14 and 15, after Hezekiah received the letter from the messengers and read it, he went up to the Lord's temple and spread out before the Lord, and Hezekiah prayed. Now, most people pray and do nothing, or prepare and don't pray. It's just human nature. We have a tendency to go one way or the other. But what the Bible is teaching us here through Hezekiah is we have to pray, and we have to plan, and we have to prepare. This prayer before the Lord: O Lord God of Israel, you are enthroned almighty before the cherubim. You alone are the God, and all the kingdoms of the earth. You alone created the heavens and the earth. So God hears the prayer and sends Isaiah the prophet. So Isaiah is the prophet during this particular time, and he sends Isaiah to respond. So we see in 2 Kings chapter 19, then Isaiah's son Amos sent a message to Hezekiah. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel says: I have heard your prayer. So he prayed, and his prayer was heard concerning the king of Assyria. This is the word the Lord has spoken against him. The virgin daughter of Zion despises you and mocks you. The daughter of Jerusalem tosses her head as you flee. So we see here that it comes down, continues on in 2 Kings, and this is the Lord's promise. And this is what the Lord says about the king of Assyria. And that is, his armies will not enter Jerusalem. They will not even shoot an arrow at it. They will not march upon its gates or upon their shields, nor the buildings against the earth or against its walls. by the same road and on the same country which he came. And then continuing on, we see that there would not be an arrow or with the Assyrian camp against it. So, I mean, that's just phenomenal what we actually see occurring there. So we've got the promises, we've got the Lord's promise that is contained within there. We see the praying, we see the preparation, and we see the prayer, we see his answer to prayer, and we see God's promise. And then we finally see in verse 35, that night the angel of the Lord went out to the Assyrians' camp and killed 185,000 Assyrian soldiers. So how's this? He plans, Hezekiah plans, prepares, prays, receives the prophet hears, and God hears, the prophet responds, and the promise is fulfilled, that not even arrow. But Hezekiah still prepares. He doesn't say, oh, God's going to look after everything. I don't have to do anything. No, he plans, he prepares, and he receives the promise. So what an important lesson for us, that we need to plan and prepare in order for the miracle to occur, and we will still receive the promise. So what actually happened is something happened that had never, ever happened before. And how do we know this? Is a little inscription that's unfortunately in a Turkish museum, which I've gone and visited. And it's called the Siloam inscription. And we have the text here of the Siloam inscription. And essentially the text tells us that the tunnel was started from two ends, not from one and making its way through, but from two ends. You know, this had never, ever been done in the history of humankind before anywhere. So God gives Hezekiah this amazing revelation that, because time's short. So now time's short, so we have to prepare. And the tunnel is starting from two different directions and meets in the middle. So what this inscription tells us is the axeman or the pixel, depending on which translation you use, they start tunneling towards one another, and then finally they can hear one another. And then eventually the axemen break through and the water flows. Now, why is the water flowing such an important fact? Well, not only have you got to get the direction right, but you've got to get the gradient of the water flow right. And they've been able to estimate that it was only about a 1 centimeter difference at the meeting point in the middle. It is an engineering marvel. To this day, nobody knows exactly how they built the tunnel. Sorry, we know how they built it. They carved it by axes, by hand. But how on earth? And we'll have a look at a little bit of the tunnel, and it curves. It goes like a snake, and still it meets in the middle. So this is an amazing miracle of God. Here's an image of the Siloam inscription, which is at the Istanbul Archaeological Museum. And it's just fascinating. I've translated in the Hebrew. I've done research. I've been through the tunnel maybe 10 times, right back in 1996 when it was in the middle of the Siloam village. And it's just an absolutely phenomenal, exciting, or maybe it's just me again, exciting place to go. And we'll have a little bit more of a look at some of those things. So here we see, have a look at this little map here. So we've got the Gihon spring. Follow the blue line of Hezekiah's tunnel, and you see the meeting point, and you can see it continuing on and going into the pool of Siloam. Just have a look at the blue line. Have a look at that. It's just crazy. It's an amazing, phenomenal thing that actually occurred. And some people think it followed a crack in the rock. Some people think it was done through tapping on the top of the stones as you go. Now, if you know a little bit about the topography, it's actually going, a hill of the city of David is actually going over the top of it exactly at that point as well. And some people think they use some sort of intelligent mathematical formula, which I think is a bit crazy. Just have a look at the curves and what goes it. I think they actually followed a crack or a fissure in the rock, and that's the most likely of what actually occurred. But that gives you some sort of idea. Now, here's we got Hezekiah built also the walls coming down from the city of David to enclose around, and we've got the remains of these walls in the city of David in the archaeological and excavation that we can see there. So we know that they then built those walls to create an extra defense around the Gihon springs. That's a nice little diagram. So here we go. This is an actual picture of the entrance. So we're looking back from just inside the tunnel, and you can see stairs that are going. The stairs weren't there, of course, in the time of Jesus. They're just for the tourists to be able to get in. Even when I went in for the first time in 1996, there weren't any stairs. You literally just walked into the tunnel off the side of the road out of the Arab village. But this area here creates that we're standing in right now is a pool, and directly above it is a hole or a tunnel where you drop a bucket from the city of David, and you would scoop your water up in the bucket, and you'd have a rope and you'd pull it up. And that's literally how the people would get their water until the tunnel was built, and that brought it right through into the tunnel itself. This is looking down, giving you a little bit of an idea of the tunnel. This is coming out the other end now. So you can't actually see the roof, but you can see the light at the other end of the tunnel where the little girl is right there. And you can see at the moment, it's not particularly deep, and we can see that there, but it's just, it really is, it's quite incredible. You can walk through this fresh water coming up out of the spring, making its way down to the other end into a small pool that we find there in the other end. So let's have a look. I've got a little video clip for you to watch walking through the tunnel, and you get a little bit of idea of how narrow it is. It's basically shoulder width, and I'm 6 foot, and for most of the time in the tunnel, I have to duck down. And let's have a look at the video and enjoy it here. You can see there, walking along, that we've got the tunnel there. It's sort of never ever particularly in a straight line, so it's following something, and it can be anywhere from ankle deep to waist deep, depending on how much rainfall they get, but it tends to be about knee deep most of the time. Coming up the corner, and you can sort of see the distance there. You can see the roof, and as I said, it's no more than 1.7 meters, or about 5.5 feet for most of the way, which also tells us that the people digging the tunnels weren't anywhere near as tall as we are today. So they were carving along, very, very narrow section coming up here and continuing on. So let's have a look at that, and it's quite amazing, and it continues on for over 500 meters. So that's something quite interesting to actually have a look at, that we see there. So finishing up our lesson for today, so we can see that we've got 4 clear lessons, 4 things that we see that we need to plan. We need to plan, hear from God, plan what we're going to do. Then we need to get wise counsel. We need to prepare. We need to actually put some effort into it, not just expect God to do everything for us. We need to prepare. Then we need to pray God for the miraculous, God to intervene, and then believe that God hears our prayer and believe for the actions to happen. So instead of us just being passive receivers of what God has for us, we need to be active receivers for what God has for us. To be active, I need to do what I can do. What could Hezekiah do? He could do what was never done before, build a tunnel from 2 ends that snaked around and met in the middle. That's what he could do. What God can do is he can stop an arrow being fired and kill 185,000 or something enemy without you lifting a finger. So we've got to do what we can do. Let God do the miraculous, and just go through into the blessings of God. So that's what we're seeing from tonight. That's Hezekiah's tunnel, the place of preparation. Prepare for the miracle of God to occur in your life. And I hope you've enjoyed this. I'm Dr. Brennan Roach, the founder of Acts Bible College, and this has been Hezekiah's tunnel, the place of preparation. So pray, believe, prepare, and we will see God do miraculous things in Jesus' name. Good night. Thank you for watching, and join us again next week.